This episode of Brains on Games is all about spelling. Welcome to Brains on Games. I'm Dr. Brian McDonald, and this episode, like I said at the beginning, is all about spelling, so you should be thrilled to be watching this one for sure. A while back, I talked about a game called Sidelinks, which was a game where you had to make connections between words, sort of like dominoes, but instead of numbers, there were words on cards. Well, at the same time as the folks at Brainy Games sent me Sidelinks, they also sent me some other games that were all about words and spelling. The first one we're going to talk about today is a game called Stackers. Right here, Stackers. So Stackers is a game that you could play solitaire. You can play with almost any number of players. It's a game that doesn't take very long, and I'd say you could play it with kids aged 8 and up. Let's take a look at Stackers from Brainy Games. This was a game that came in a clear box, which is why I didn't hold up a box with the logo on it to show you. What you've got inside that box are a whole bunch of these wooden tiles. They're laser cut tiles, and they have 1 or 2 or 3 letters on them and a point value underneath. I've included a few here above the board. You've got randomly placed letter blocks, and each player is going to start the game with 5 of those tiles. The goal of the game, you decide at the beginning, the goal of the game is either to be the first one to get rid of all of your letter tiles or to be the first one to reach a certain point value, like 200 points. No doubt you're familiar with these kinds of games. I mean, Scrabble is a good example where you're just trying to spell words, but this one is three-dimensional. And I have not, I'm going to be honest with you, I haven't decided whether the fact that you've got 1 or 2 or 3 letters on your tile makes it easier for the kids who you might be playing with or more challenging. As you might know, I have older kids at home, so I haven't had a chance to play this one with younger kids. But I find that the tiles with multiple letters, at the same time, they seem to make the game more flexible, but you're also more limited by the letters that you have on these little squares. WH is a good example. So here's a tile that has 2 letters that commonly go together. This is a good tile to have in your hand. I mean, I and N go together too, but you're going to be making certain kinds of words with I and N, and you need other letters on the grid to be able to do that. Like I said, it is three-dimensional though. What you're doing, there's a good reason why it's called Stackers. You're adding these letter tiles on top of the other ones in order to spell words. And there's a few ways you can do that. Obviously, this is a game that is about spelling. That's a skill that it's going to try to develop, is your spelling skills. You need to be a good speller in order to be successful and to get the most points on this game. Helps to have a good vocabulary too. If you have a big bank of words to choose from, it makes it easier to play a game like this. You're using a bit of spatial skills as well because you are doing this all in 3 dimensions. So I've got my WH here. I could put it down here in the corner. You see there's an O. I could put it on top of the O, and that spells who, and that's going to give me 17 points. I had to peek to see how many points the O was worth. You can spell words up and down, or you could spell them from side to side. I could put my WH here and spell it this way if I chose to do it like that. And that's a word that nets me 17 points. It gets rid of one of those tiles, and the next player will be allowed to go after that. If you can't place one of your tiles to form a word, well, you need to draw another one. There's 170. I have a bag here full of them. There's 170 of these letter tiles in the bag. And if you can't get rid of one of yours, you're going to wind up taking on more. That gives you more options maybe next time. Another tile I happen to have was that in. I could put it right up here on top of TO. Then it spells into. That's going to give me 10 points. What would be great is if I could place some letters that spelled more than one word. Then I'm going to get the points for all of those tiles that are involved, which would be a pretty good way to score lots of points. If I were more skilled at these kinds of games, I would have laid out the board and chosen some letters that would allow me to show you how to score multiple points with multiple words on a turn. I didn't do that. These games are not my forte, I'll be honest with you. I'm great at the vocabulary games, but these games where you're spelling, and especially when it's 3 dimensions, I always find that to be challenging. You might all be looking at these tiles and the ones here that are on the board and have a dozen ideas of where you would place if you were playing the game with these tiles in your hand. And that is Stackers in a nutshell. A 3-dimensional spelling game that works those spelling skills. It's great if you've got a good vocabulary. You can build the vocabulary when you're playing with skilled players, and it requires you to do some visualization. One of the great things about games like this is that there's research on reading skills and decoding that's found that if you're looking at words that are going up and down instead of just from side to side, it forces you to pay attention to the letters and to exercise your decoding skills rather than guessing based on the shape of the word or on the first couple of letters in the word. Word find games and games like this are a good way to encourage kids to be looking at words vertically as well as horizontally. And in this case, because the words might be split with 2 letters on each line, it's even more complicated for you to put those together in your mind. The second brainy game of this episode is called Wonky Words. Here's another clear package with a bunch of letter tiles inside. In fact, round letter tiles this time. We'll talk about that in a moment. But Wonky Words is a game that can be played with between 1 and 6 players. Kids age 6 and up might be able to play this one. I think with the spelling it might be a little bit complicated, but 6 and up is what it says here on the instructions. And it doesn't take too long to play a game like this. It all depends on where you set the point value that you're shooting for. How does this game work with simultaneous play? Everybody's got some letters, some 10 letters you start with. You've got a few of these right in front of you, but the other shapes are just in the center. You can grab them anytime you need them. And you start with those 10 letter tiles, and you're just filling up these little shapes with those letters in order to form words, and then you're adding those to the center. You might begin like this with a word like emote, and that's going to get me, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 letters, but because I've spelled such a long word and filled up this tile, there's a ×3 multiplier here, which would give me a total of 15 points. Everyone is racing to place their words, to fill up those tiles, to fill up the biggest tiles possible so you can get the most points, and to combine with the words that are already on the table in order to earn even extra points for letters that are already there. It took me a while to figure out how to make this one, but now you've got 3 words and you'd score for all of those letters. That's huge, especially when you look at the ×5 multiplier on this little T shape over here. That's a lot of points. You definitely need to have a scorekeeper who can keep track of the math when everybody's racing to do this all at the same time. But only the scorekeeper really is exercising those math skills. Everyone else is doing that spelling and vocabulary, but huge spatial demands because you're building a puzzle out of these words. And some of the pieces are pretty complicated when you think about filling them with those little letters. There's a bit of a visual motor component to the game too, but that's not what it's meant to be all about. And that is Wonky Words in a nutshell. The wonkiest word game that I know of, where you're trying to fit Tetris pieces together into a crossword, everybody racing simultaneously to get as many points as possible. Vocabulary, spatial skills, and some math for the scorekeeper. Thanks to Brainy Games for sending along Wonky Words and Stackers for me to try out. You can find Brainy Games at brainy.games online. And if you want to find me, you can find me at brian@brainsongames.ca. Brainsongames.ca is the website. That's where you can find previous episodes, and future episodes will go up there too. Brains on Games is the Twitter handle and the Facebook page and the Instagram feed. And I want to let everybody know that I've been experimenting with Monday and Thursday videos. We're going back to a weekly schedule, and videos are going to be posted on Mondays only from here on in. But if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to be notified of future ones, you can head on over to YouTube and click that subscribe button. Thanks for joining me, and hopefully I'll see you next time.